Week 1 is in the books, and whether you're looking to celebrate or commiserate, we got you covered. The Fantasy GOAT starts right now.
This is the Fantasy GOAT, sponsored by Casablanca Resort and Casino, like Vegas used to be.
Welcome to the Fantasy GOAT. I'm Mike Davis. That's Jason Feinberg. Jason, Week 1. Let's just let out an exhale. Namaste. Something like that. I mean, we're all feeling it. I think the big thing we got to dial in on right now as we're kicking off Livestock, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, when you saw that
Mike,
into his New York career, what was the first thing going through your head when you saw that?
What are we going to do with Garrett Wilson? Because I have him in 3 leagues. I went out of my way to even draft him earlier than a lot of people would ADP-wise. And now who's going to throw him the ball? I mean, Zach Wilson, yeah, he did an okay job last year finding, but even the last game, the throws weren't very good. Garrett was able to catch them, but I'm worried.
It's upsetting because I think a lot of people were high on guys like Garrett Wilson and just that whole New York team because of what a future Hall of Famer brings to the table. Yeah. The only bright spot you can really think about, because it's devastating news, is Breece Hall.
Yeah.
He looked super good coming back from that injury. So that's a bright spot, at least, for that New York team. Now, as we're moving on to other injuries here in this Week 1, J.K. Dobbins. This is a guy, I mean, I'm always out on him just because it's like peanut butter and jelly. J.K. Dobbins and injuries, they just go together really well. It's a shame. I feel bad, but now it's Gus Edwards, Justice Hill are going to be kind of the guys that they feel are filling that void. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, we spent more time talking about J.K. Dobbins just then than he has actually played in any given season. So I give us credit for that.
Yeah.
I like them both. I think that Baltimore is and always will be a committee. So I think if you have either one, you're in better shape than a lot of the committees. For instance, like in Indianapolis.
Right. I'm kind of out on Baltimore. Lamar had a down week. I think he's going to be needing to run a little bit more, but they were controlling that game so well in Week 1 that they didn't really have to have him run. But, I'm kind of out on them. I would say, though, Fournette, Kareem Hunt could be guys that are potentially looking to go into that Baltimore backfield. Now, let's talk about this. The big O. Jason.
You mean the jersey numbers that they're wearing now?
No, not the DeAndre Swift or Calvin Ridley's. I'm talking about bona fide options that people were drafting early on, like T. Higgins. I mean, Dallas Goedert, Drake London. These are guys who got a big 0 in Week 1. Is this something that you would be worried about if you were a T. Higgins owner?
No, I wouldn't be worried about Higgins. I wouldn't be worried about Goddard. I might be a little bit worried about London because they are running the ball a lot in Atlanta.
Yeah, and Desmond really, I think he threw the ball about 15 times.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty low. But, it doesn't feel good to get a 0, and you don't want to panic. Later on in our show, we're going to be talking to Ian Ritchie, the founder of Full Time Fantasy. Yeah. He's going to be telling us a little bit about, just how to kind of keep yourself from having that panic meter going crazy, because that's not a good thing.
Because you panic
in
enough
Week 1.
in general.
In real
so we
life,
don't need that.
I don't need that. Fantasy football is supposed to be my haven. And lastly, let's talk about this. This is really a cause for concern. All these quarterbacks that signed major contracts in the offseason. We're talking Lamar Jackson. We're talking Joe Burrow. We're talking Jalen Hurts. All these guys really floundered in Week 1, and top QBs struggling like that is a major issue. I know as a Lamar Jackson owner, I'm a little concerned and feel bad. What was your take on all that from Week 1 and just seeing, these superstar QBs floundering?
Well, I'm hoping it's just because it's game 1 and, a lot of them don't play in the preseason and they're getting the cobwebs out. But the top 5, I know we can expand on this later, top 5, the good news for fantasy is I don't think anybody played any of these guys. Even Tua was a backup drafted. He was number 1. Mac Jones, nobody played. Jordan Love, Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson, people might have played.
Right.
Top 5 right there.
It's crazy. And you know what? This really puts me to shame because you're always saying, strategy-wise, wait for that QB. And look, you really can wait potentially if these guys are not going to produce at the level that they think. Now, here's a very exciting thing, Jason. We are introducing our hole-in-one Player of the Week, sponsored by Casablanca Casino and Resort. So this is the guy who just balled out. He hit a complete hole-in-one, and you know who that is? Very fun name to say.
You want to say it at the same time?
Let's say it.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
Puka
Nacua.
Nacua. Oh, that sounds good.
It's very.
It's almost like Hakuna Matata.
You know what? It's very
bit.
similar.
Yeah.
And we are going to be saying a Hakuna Matata for this guy because, listen, I mean, Puka Nacua, 5th round draft pick out of BYU. Okay, this guy goes onto the field, his first time playing in the pros, gets on the field, has over 10 receptions, over 100 yards. There's only 4 other. He's the 4th guy to ever do that in his rookie game.
Yeah, the question is, will he be able to keep it up? You know, Cooper Kupp most likely will be coming back, and what will that mean? Will he have a reduced role? Looks pretty talented so far, though. He might be able to sustain these types of numbers even when Kupp is back. By the way, did you ever wear one of the Puka shell necklaces?
No, you know what? I actually have.
Yeah.
My dad did buy me one of those ones.
Pretty
They
cool.
look pretty cool.
Yeah.
We might be all in on Puka, and I mean, he really is filling that void for Cooper in, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's fascinating, but that is our hole-in-one player of the week. So, congrats to Puka Nacua. Very fun to say. Coming up, guys, after a short break, we're doing a deep dive. We're going GOAT vision for our QBs and RBs. That's after the break.
Before we head to break, in week 2 of 2014, this Chicago quarterback tossed 4 touchdown passes on the road to beat San Francisco and finish as the week's 2nd highest scoring QB. Which QB was it? The answer after the break. Welcome back. Before we went to break, we asked you, in week 2 of 2014, this Chicago quarterback tossed 4 touchdown passes on the road to beat San Francisco and finish as the week's 2nd highest scoring quarterback. Who was it? The answer, Jay Cutler, who played for Chicago from 2009 to 2016.
Welcome back to the Fantasy GOAT. Okay, so Jason, GOAT Vision now. We're doing this a little differently this week, which I love. We're kind of, talking about the guys that we're pretty high on and the guys we're not so high on. Let's start with QBs and where you're at.
All right, so the guys I'm high on, and I didn't think I was going to be high on Patrick Mahomes after Thursday night, but when Sunday rolled around and you saw how, like you said, the other high quarterbacks, I guess from the draft, right? Fantasy draft, we're doing. She did pretty well. It's his receivers that let him down. So I'm putting Patrick Mahomes in the good column along with Matt Stafford, who he didn't throw for any touchdowns, but he threw to Puka Nacua for 119 yards and Tutu Atwell for 119 yards. He could be he's been around a long time, but kind of like a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady who makes heroes out of these guys that you wouldn't normally think of. As far as the guys I was not happy with, Lamar Jackson and Geno Smith.
Yeah, not great with them.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is, to me, this is why Patrick Mahomes is so spectacular. Even in a game where the eye test, you're watching him, it doesn't look like they're clicking and firing in all cylinders. He still ends up with 20 points, and that's just how gifted he is. And that's why he's in such a different category compared to the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, all that kind of stuff.
How about you?
For me, this is where I'm at. I mean, listen, Tua Tagovailoa.
Wow.
This guy, incredible. Him and Mike McDaniels, they just have a great thing that's going on in Miami.
And remember, Tua didn't even know who he was when he first when he first got the job. McDaniels, I don't know if you remember this, but he called him to tell him, "Hey, I'm your coach. I can't wait to work." And Tua was like, "Who are you?" Yeah, it was hilarious.
But he's a genius.
Yeah.
And we're seeing him just kind of work in a rhythm with this offense in a totally different light. 466 yards, 3 TDs, 1 interception. It's going to be really hard for teams to really play them in man, play them in zone. And the bottom line is the whole offseason, his focus was jiu-jitsu, trying to actually prevent him from having another, spout of injuries and all that kind of stuff. So I think Tua, I'm all in on, and I love him. The other guy, Brock Purdy, man.
Did great.
When we're talking a guy who feels like Tom Brady, and producer James is the guy who kind of put me onto this, but I'm feeling it. Purdy and accuracy-wise reminds me of Brady. He's in command, he's in control, and he's throwing those passes in a great way. And the guys...
By the way, jiu-jitsu for Tua, high karate, cologne for me. Same?
Cologne?
Yeah, no, it's a good one.
Similar.
It's like Old Spice.
It's supposed
Old
to help.
Spice.
He's doing it to make you, make sure you can fall well.
Yeah.
So he's not getting those
Good idea.
concussions.
All right.
So Purdy, Tua, big on them. And then, unfortunately, Pickett looked really bad this
he
week.
did.
But the other guy I'm worried about is Joe Burrow. I mean, to throw 82 yards on 32 attempts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost harder than throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns.
I'm not worried about him, though.
You're not?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Why?
Again, he had the bum leg. He didn't play much of the preseason. This is basically his first preseason game.
I feel.
Oh, they'll be all right.
Listen, you signed for Saturday a contract for $275 million, and then the next day you have the worst game of your career.
Yeah.
It's troubling. I got to see more on him. I'm happy I don't have him right now.
Yeah,
in
I actually
any
don't either.
leagues.
Yeah.
Now let's move on, though, to running back. So RB-wise, tell me where you're at with the guys that you're really falling in love with this week.
Well, I did get Bijan in one league, but I also picked up Tyler Algier in one league, not knowing what to expect from him, and I was pleasantly surprised. They're using them both, and Tyler Algier was one of the best running backs with a couple touchdowns. And still, Bijan got a lot of work, so I'm up on him. Breece Hall, we already talked about. He was shot out of a cannon. The guys, worried about, in Indianapolis, we're still trying to figure out their backfield. But Deion Jackson did not do anything to secure that starting role. He had 13 rushes for 14 yards. That's 1.1 average.
Oh, my God. That's awful. Okay, and that Evan Hull, also got hurt as well. So who knows what's going to be going on there. Looks more like Zach Moss.
Yeah.
For me, this was the big highlights. I mean, watching Nick Chubb is like, that's pays the money for admission. Just to watch this guy on TV, he's so special and dynamic, and you can see that big blowout win against Pittsburgh. They're going to be playing well, and I think the smart way to coach this team is to give Chubb the ball so Watson doesn't have to work as hard. 18 carries, 106 yards, 14 fantasy points in standard leagues. He did well. And Jerome Ford, the backup, who's kind of the counterpart now in Cleveland, like the Kareem Hunt, he only had 15 carries, but he fumbled. He didn't look great.
Yeah.
So Chubb is going to be the guy, and I just think he could be a RB1 this year. And also McCaffrey. I mean, what can you say about this guy? He's just spectacular, and you might not even need Mitchell as a handcuff anymore.
He barely played.
He barely played. It's incredible. Now, negatively, I want to highlight a couple things. Rashad White was a big interest factor to me. This is a guy who got the volume and the workload, but didn't do well. 39 yards on 17 carries isn't what you wanted to see with him. And Dameon Pierce, I mean, this is a guy who last year we were all so high on, only getting 6 fantasy points, 11 carries on 38 yards. Not good to see. And here's the interesting fact that I found out that I don't like at all. He only played 47% of the snaps. Out of 77 snaps, he only played 47, and he's supposed to be the guy there, getting the volume. So
I stayed away from him because Houston's offense still is a question mark.
I would have figured, if anything, this is a rookie running back who showed promise last year. Now you got C.J. Stroud, rookie QB. Maybe you want to have the running game,
like a safety blanket,
but
security blanket.
They're not doing that well. So it's interesting. So that's our QBs, RBs for GOAT Vision this week. Coming up after a short break, we're going to be introducing you to our GOAT Vision when it comes to wide receivers and tight ends.
Before we head to break, in week 2 of 2015, this Baltimore tight end caught 2 touchdown passes in a loss at Oakland, but finished as the week's top tight end. Which tight end was it? The answer after the break. Welcome back. Before we went to break, we asked, in week 2 of 2015, this Baltimore tight end caught 2 touchdown passes in a loss at Oakland, but finished as the week's top tight end. Who was it? The answer, tight end Crockett Gilmore, who played for Baltimore from 2014 to 2016.
Welcome back to the Fantasy GOAT. Okay, so Jason, GOAT Vision now, wide receiver and tight ends. Let's start with wideouts. DeAndre Hopkins, I loved him. He got 38% of Tannehill's target share. Great stuff there. The big guy, though, I'm really down on, Christian Kirk. This is a guy who was out there for 96% of pass plays last year. Now in Jacksonville, 69% of the time out on the field. So he's clearly not the guy. Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, those are the guys. That's how I'm feeling about wideouts this week after week 1.
I was real surprised with Kendrick Bourne. I liked him in San Francisco, and now he's over at New England, and he seems to be the number one target for Mac Jones. A lot of people didn't even draft him, so he was real popular on the waiver wire this week. River Craycraft only because of the name, and he did get a touchdown. You got to love that name. Kadarius Toney down on. Yes. We all know why. He single-handedly ruined that game. But watch, he'll have a great week now. And then Drake London, we already talked about him. He really needs to shape things up and have that ball thrown to him.
Yeah. All right, now let's move on to tight ends. Tight end wise, listen, a rookie QB's best friend, who is it, Jason?
The tight end.
It's the tight end. That's why I'm loving Hayden Hurst right now with Bryce Young in Carolina. Guy did a great job for week one. The guy that I'm not so high on, I know he starts slow sometimes, like you always say, George Kittle.
Yeah.
But listen, 3 catches, 19 yards. It's not good enough for where people are drafting George Kittle, and I think San Francisco, there's a lot to go around with Ayuk, Debo, McCaffrey. Yep. So Kittle might not be in that elevated tier that we think anymore.
Just going off of a veteran you were mentioning, but Hunter Henry did a really good job. But I like Pat Freiermuth. He didn't have a very good fantasy game, but he was gritty and tough, and he was getting knocked all over the place and still managed to get that really good touchdown pass. Chigakonkwo down on, and I just like saying his name, but he went 0 for 3 with 0 yards. And then one rookie down on is Jake Ferguson with Dallas.
All right, there you go. All right, some good guys there. Coming up after a short break, we're doing a deep dive with fantasy expert Ian Ritchie at Full Time Fantasy. Stick around. Jason, we're about to talk to your really good friend, Ian Ritchie, the founder of Full Time Fantasy, one of the greatest fantasy minds on the planet. Let's hear what Ian had to say about week one. What's great about fantasy football is, the intensity, and everybody carries all this enthusiasm from the draft into week one, and then week one settles in and there's dread, this impending doom that just starts settling in because now all these guys that you drafted, that you loved, are not producing like you thought. Let's just list off some guys that had incredibly weird week ones. Guys like Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. All these guys who signed big contracts. And then you get into the receivers like the T. Higgins, who doesn't have a catch. And Drake London doesn't even get a catch, 1 target or something like that. So what do you tell fantasy managers when it comes to, just locking in and taking in the information from week one? How do we move forward after a week one like this? What's the best advice you have?
Yeah, it's hard not to get yourself to panic because, like you said, you do a lot of preparation. You are married to certain players and have convinced yourself the narrative that you sold yourself, which is this guy's on a perfect spot, this guy's with a new coordinator, and you come up with all these narratives that fit the end you want. And then on Christmas morning, when you open up all your presents, they aren't necessarily the gifts you thought you were getting. And it makes it really tough. And, there's a lot of guys. Goddard had a 0, and he was one of the better tight ends. And, Tyler Lockett had 2 catches in the first drive, never saw the ball again in his hands. There's a lot of that goes on. And for me, I always say, stick with what you did, believe in yourself, right? Until the eye test proves you wrong.
What's the advice you have for managers to kind of separate yourself from playing those blue chip guys that you feel like you have to play, but when you actually consider the scenarios and how Tua was probably going to be in more of a shootout and Lamar was probably going to, not have to use his legs because they were going to have control of the game. Do you really see a lot of people doing that? And do you think that's a good strategy to utilize, or do you really have to play your blue chip players?
I think early in the season, everybody's reaction is to play all their guys they drafted early, right? I think there's a lot of Algiers on benches, right? For Pacheco's or for other guys that were taken earlier, right? And I think that's kind of one of the issues. But look, we're in Vegas, right? And Vegas is all about setting the lines on games and over-unders. And so one of the things that a lot of the better players do, or the best players in the world, is they load up as many players as they can in the highest total games. So when you look at games and you see the over-under totals, that's kind of your giveaway of the players you want to load up in games.
Got to thank Ian Ritchie with Full Time Fantasy. Great insight there. Now, Jason, we got to find out who was the GOAT of week one. That's coming up. We got GOAT lineup after a short break. Oh, it's the best time of the show. GOAT lineup. Jason, reminder for everybody at home, GOAT lineup. That's when we go head to head and we get to really test our knowledge. So last week, very exciting week for me. I drafted a nice amount of guys for that week one. But remember, we can only use these guys one time around. For me, Sam Howell really came through big in Madison. So
yeah, I don't even want to talk about anybody on my team because everyone disappointed. Geno Smith at the helm of disappointment.
Yeah, so it's not good. So that means I'm 1-0
Yeah.
right now, ladies and gentlemen, but it's a long season. Let's dive in, though, to GOAT Week 2, GOAT lineup Week 2. Who do you have? I know we're both sharing Baker Mayfield.
Both going with Baker, so that means it's the other positions where we're going to have to diversify. So I'm going with some heavy hitters this week. I'm going with Josh Jacobs, running back, DK Metcalf at wide receiver, and Sam Laporta looked pretty good as the rookie tight end for Detroit.
Okay, there you go. We're sharing Baker, like we said. I got Derrick Henry, Gabe Davis, who I'm hoping is going to come through finally. I think they got a rebound from that crazy week one, and Hunter Henry in New England.
Yeah, strike while it's hot.
Exactly. Okay. I think there could be a new regurgitation of nice tight end play in New England.
It is nice to see some of the veteran tight ends like a Hayden Hurst or Hunter Henry that are coming through, because I think a lot of people during the draft were gravitating towards the rookies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm still high on them as well. But fun week one. Guys, kids at home, we got a long season. So just buckle in, get ready, because week one was fun and it's filled with endless fun.
I got to come up with some sort of way to get through. If we have a week like we had in week one, something, I don't know if it's yoga or breathing exercises, but I was stressed out. Because when you have guys like Jamar Chase that get you very few points and Higgins who gets zero, I don't know, Mike. What you stress a lot. What do you do?
You drink goat milk. I'm already thinking like a champion, and I'm only drinking it out of goblets. That's a callback to episode 1. Guys, week 1, it was a fun one. We got more. Let's gear up for week 2. Good seeing you, Jason.
Yes. All right. I'm going to win this one.
Good luck this week.
Thank you.
Kids, we'll see you next time.